They thought they had more time. Outside your window, everything may still look the same. The sky remains blue in some places. People continue going to work. The news still arrives, as usual. But in the silence between one notification and the next, the year 2025 is already more than halfway over, and the world is no longer the same. Perhaps you felt a strange uneasiness over these past few months, a sense that something invisible is pushing history toward an abyss. Wars are breaking out in regions that once felt distant. The climate is spiraling out of control with a string of extreme events. Hunger is rising in countries that used to export food, and the global economy is fluctuating, as if on the brink of collapse. But what if all of this is more than just a string of crises? What if this is the last year of relative peace, before the Great Tribulation begins? What if the signs of the end are already right before your eyes, and you simply haven't noticed yet? Today, we're going to open the pages of one of the Bible's greatest secrets and reveal why so many scholars, prophecy interpreters, and spiritual leaders are pointing specifically to the year 2025 as the year that could mark the beginning of the Great Tribulation. We're not talking about random predictions, nor about religious sensationalism. What we're about to show has been written in the scriptures for thousands of years, waiting for the right moment to be understood. While you follow the news, while you try to keep up with your daily routine, as if it were possible to ignore everything that's happening, an invisible line is being crossed, a point of no return that perhaps has already been left behind. The global stage isn't just chaotic, it's prophetic. Every war, every famine, every climate shift, every economic downturn carries the weight of a spiritual warning. God's clock seems to be speeding up, while humanity slows down its pursuit of truth. And the most frightening thing is realizing that the greatest danger may not be what the eyes can see, but what the Spirit is about to feel. Before we talk about dates, prophetic countdowns, and the details that connect 2025 to the book of Revelation, you need to recognize the signs that are already here, not in the future, not in some distant prediction, but right now, in every siren, in every hunger statistic, in every nighttime silence that brings that uncomfortable question, what's happening to the world? And perhaps the answer is closer and more urgent than you imagine. While you try to find a logical explanation for everything that's happening, the facts keep piling up. The news comes in waves: armed conflicts, growing hunger, natural disasters. But perhaps the most frightening part is realizing that all of this was foretold centuries ago. The words of Jesus, spoken on the Mount of Olives, were not left to chance. He described, with a level of precision that now feels unsettling, exactly what would mark the beginning of the end times. He said we would hear of wars and rumors of wars, of famines, plagues, and earthquakes in various places. And now, all of this is right before our eyes. The statistics from the year 2025 are undeniable. Military conflicts are intensifying across at least 3 continents. Hunger has reached historic levels, with millions struggling for basic food. Earthquakes have become so frequent that experts are already talking about a new era of seismic instability. But what about the cooling of love? That may be the most invisible and at the same time the most devastating sign. Urban violence is on the rise. Social media has turned into an arena of hatred. Families are growing distant. Churches are emptying of genuine faith. What once united now divides. What was once sacred has become a target of mockery. And you, how many times have you caught yourself saying the world feels colder? How many times, after seeing a tragedy, have you simply changed the channel, as if it were just one more in a long list? Perhaps, without even realizing it, you too have started to ignore the signs, as if they were just a natural part of modern life. But What if all of this is exactly what Jesus said would happen just before the Great Tribulation? What if, instead of just another phase, we are witnessing the fulfillment of a biblical prophecy written thousands of years ago? This is not a historical coincidence. It's an alignment, a direct echo of what's recorded in the book of Matthew, chapter 24, a chapter you may have read before, but never seen through the eyes of today. The signs of the end are not theory. They are on the ground, on the screens, in the headlines, and inside our homes. If you feel like this message is speaking directly to your heart, if you believe more people need to open their eyes, leave a like and subscribe to the channel right now. Your action could help this truth reach those who most need to hear it. And even though all of this may already seem frightening, what we're about to reveal next goes beyond visible signs. There's a biblical mystery buried within the prophecies, a timeline that points to something even more specific and more urgent than anything we've seen so far. If the visible signs are already frightening, what can we say then about the invisible ones? Those that aren't on the front pages nor in expert charts, but hidden within the pages of an ancient prophecy, written by a man who, in the silence of his chamber, wept and sought answers before God. While the world keeps debating the effects of wars, hunger, and diseases, there is a prophetic countdown that began ticking long before our generation was even born. A cycle that now seems to be approaching a decisive point. In the book of Daniel, chapter 9, lies one of the greatest biblical mysteries of all time, the prophecy of the 70 weeks. These are not ordinary weeks. Each one represents a prophetic period loaded with eternal significance. Daniel received, directly from God, a vision that divided the history of Israel, and in a way the history of all humanity, into three major blocks. 69 weeks have already been fulfilled. They followed Israel's journey from the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the coming of the Messiah. But there is one last week, a final stage that to this day remains as a promised judgment still to come. And this is where the year 2025 takes on a weight that few are noticing. The rebirth of Israel as a nation in 1948 was a milestone that, according to many scholars, started the final phase of the prophetic countdown. And now, as we count 77 years since that event, the eyes of those who study prophecy are turning with urgency toward the present time. 77 years, a number that, in biblical symbolism, always represents complete cycle. God has acted in cycles of 7 throughout all sacred history, from creation to the Jubilee, from purification to the weeks of Daniel. Is it just a coincidence that this cycle is closing now? Many serious scholars from different parts of the world are carefully and fearfully analyzing the dates, the signs, and the spiritual condition of Israel and the nations. They point out that the time for the final week may be about to begin, but perhaps what's most unsettling is not just the calendar, but the spiritual silence hanging over Jerusalem. The city that should be on high alert seems distracted. The nations, absorbed in their own conflicts, ignore what is unfolding behind the scenes of eternity. And you, how many times have you read these passages without realizing what was behind them? How many times have you heard sermons about Daniel, but never connected the events in Israel with the exact time we are now living in? The prophetic clock does not pause because of human disbelief. It does not delay because of spiritual indifference. It keeps moving, counting every second, every decision, every event. While world leaders sign treaties, while the eyes of the world focus on wars and catastrophes, an invisible storyline keeps unfolding. According to what was written thousands of years ago, the year 2025 may not just be another difficult year. It may be the exact moment when heaven initiates the final prophetic week. And when this cycle begins, there will be no turning back. While the prophecy of Daniel still echoes in your mind, the physical world is starting to show signs that something greater and darker is in motion. We are no longer talking about distant predictions, but about events now taking shape right before our eyes. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, once seen as poetic symbols, now seem to be moving among the nations, leaving trails that no political analyst can fully explain. Every crisis feels like part of an invisible script, written long before our generation was born. The first horseman, traditionally interpreted as the spirit of conquest, appears to be advancing through political strategies, economic manipulations, and global movements that challenge the sovereignty of nations. Control has become more valuable than military victory, a silent domination, yet increasingly suffocating. Then comes the second horseman, the one of war, leaving a path of destruction. In recent months, the number of armed conflicts has doubled compared to previous years. Regions once peaceful now breathe fear and violence. Entire peoples are being dragged into battles they barely understand. But it is with the third horseman, the one of famine, that reality strikes closer to home. The year 2025 has already gone down in history as the year when millions are facing severe food insecurity. Food prices have reached record highs. Long lines for food have become a common sight in countries once considered stable, and when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the fourth horseman, the one of pestilence, advances silently, but with devastating force. New diseases are emerging with unexpected mutations. Healthcare systems are collapsing. Authorities struggle to contain the panic, but each new outbreak seems harder to control. In some regions, the fear is no longer just of death, but of the inability to predict the next blow. While science races for answers, the spiritual clock moves forward, as if each crisis were an invisible trumpet, echoing over humanity. What was once studied in theological seminaries is now on the streets. The book of Revelation, chapter 6, describes these four horsemen as the first judgments that precede the Great Tribulation. And for the first time in decades, scholars, spiritual leaders, and even secular analysts are beginning to agree. We are living through a convergence of crises like never before. But perhaps the most frightening part is not the war, nor the famine, nor the diseases. What's most terrifying is the speed at which all of this is happening, a sequence of impacts coming so fast that there's barely time to catch a breath between one tragedy and the next. Meanwhile, heaven remains seemingly silent. There are no new prophecies, no new promises of delay. What there is a staggering world and a prophetic script that continues verse by verse. And the question now echoing is, how much longer will the horsemen ride before the next seal is broken? As the horsemen advance across the nations, leaving behind a trail of hunger, war, and pestilence, there is another kind of collapse. One that doesn't appear in the headlines or in humanitarian crisis reports. A collapse that strikes at faith, the heart, and the spiritual core of millions of people, all at the same time. It is apostasy, the great spiritual falling away. A slow yet devastating process that has already begun and now is gaining speed. Unlike wars, it doesn't come with the noise of bombs. Unlike pestilence, it doesn't cause fever or coughing, but little by little, it suffocates the fire of faith, turning hearts that were once passionate for God into barren ground, lifeless and without repentance. In recent weeks, while nations struggle for stability, many pulpits remain prophetically silent. There is no longer preaching about repentance. There is no longer a cry for holiness. The fear of God seems to have been exchanged for self-help talks and promises of earthly comfort. What was supposed to be a warning has turned into entertainment, short sermons, watered-down messages, and a generation that is slowly forgetting how to bend their knees. And you, How many times have you walked into a service and left with the feeling that you heard everything except the voice of God? How many times have you seen leaders avoiding topics like sin, judgment, or holiness, afraid of losing followers? This is not an isolated phenomenon. It's global. Across continents, churches that were once known for their faithfulness now bow to cultural pressure. They trade truth for politically correct speeches. They avoid biblical texts that confront and embrace any narrative that guarantees applause. The Apostle Paul had already warned us. In his second letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 2, he described that before the day of the Lord, there would be a great apostasy, a mass exodus from the truth, a conscious rejection of the genuine gospel, and that is exactly what we're seeing right now, not as a future risk, but as a present reality, growing by the day. While world leaders try to manage external crises, the greatest collapse is happening inside hearts. An entire generation choosing convenience over the cross, preferring a gospel without surrender, without sacrifice, and without transformation. And the most frightening part is that this apostasy is almost invisible. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It settles in slowly, one compromise at a time, one silence at a time, until the flame simply goes out. And have you stopped to notice if this is happening to you as well? The problem is that this spiritual fall does not come alone. It's the precursor of something even more serious, a clear prophetic sign that we are very close to a new stage of judgment. While distracted churches debate peripheral matters, while services turn into shows, and while many play games with eternity, on the other side of the world, in Jerusalem, something is stirring. And when heaven's attention turns back to Israel, the next sealed may be about to be broken. While faith crumbles in so many hearts, while churches lose themselves in empty speeches, there is one place where heaven's silence seems to carry a different weight: Jerusalem, the city that once witnessed miracles, battles, and divine encounters, now becomes once again the center of prophetic tension. But this time, with a kind of urgency that unsettles even the most seasoned analysts. In the final weeks of the year 2025, the headlines began to change their tone. What was once merely a diplomatic dispute now involves large-scale military movements. Troops are being positioned, public threats are being made, direct confrontations erupt along the borders. The residents of Jerusalem live between the sound of sirens and hurried prayers. While global leaders try to negotiate, the heavens seem to remain in a profound silence. The prophet Zechariah in chapter 12 had warned Jerusalem would become a cup of trembling for all nations, a center of global instability. And now, that prophecy is taking on frighteningly real dimensions. The Temple Mount has once again become the epicenter of tension. It's not just a geographic location, it's a symbol, a spiritual line dividing the visible and the invisible. Recent reports indicate increasingly frequent clashes between radical groups. Security forces are ramping up their presence in the area. Social media is flooded with images of protests, confrontations, and screams echoing through the narrow streets of the old city. Between one conflict and another, whispers that something bigger is about to happen drift through the halls of power. The atmosphere is no longer one of simple political disagreement. It's pre-war. It's prophetic tension, where every movement seems to carry the weight of centuries of sacred history and foretold judgments. But perhaps the most terrifying thing is not what the eyes can see, but what the hearts can discern. There is a sense, almost tangible, that we are very close to a breaking point. Something invisible, yet pressing upon the spirit, as if time itself were about to run out. And have you ever asked yourself, why Jerusalem? Why, out of all the cities in the world, does this one carry such a devastating spiritual weight? Since the days of Abraham, Jerusalem has been the line that divides heaven and earth, the stage of sacrifices, of promises, and according to the scriptures, the future setting of the greatest spiritual confrontation in history. The book of Joel, chapter 3, also describes a time when all nations would be drawn into judgment because of Israel. The current movements seem to echo that very warning. Inside the city, there is fear, but also a silent expectation. Rabbis, pastors, and spiritual leaders are beginning to realize that the coming months could redefine modern history. Diplomats are trying to delay the inevitable, but the tension keeps growing. Commerce feels the impact. Tourism vanishes. The sky remains quiet, but the earth seems to tremble. What many ignore is that Jerusalem is not just the center of a political dispute. It is, and always has been, God's spiritual clock for the world. As armies take their positions and nations choose sides, prophecy unfolds before a generation that perhaps is not ready for what comes next. And when this cup of trembling overflows, the effects will not be limited to the Middle East. The shaking will be global. And no matter how hard the world tries to negotiate peace, perhaps the next move will not come from earth, but from heaven. As the world watches the conflicts, the disasters, and the silence from heaven, an inevitable question begins to echo, not just inside churches, but in the hearts of ordinary people across all nations. Is the year 2025 just another turbulent year, or are we standing at the threshold of the Great Tribulation? The signs have been given, the warnings proclaimed. Prophecies that once seemed distant now come alive on screens, in the streets, in the news, and inside homes. The spiritual dilemma now is real and urgent. Is this the time of the imminent rapture? Is it the last opportunity for conversion before the judgments intensify? Or are we living through just one more echo of mercy before revelation? And the year 2025 trigger a cycle the world will never forget. While theologians debate, while experts search for interpretations, there is one decision that only you can make. If this message has stirred something in you, if what you've heard has made your heart race, then do not remain indifferent. Be part of this mission. Subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on notifications, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth. Every person you reach could be someone who today stands on the edge between faith and forgetting. The book of Revelation describes in detail the cycles of judgment yet to come. The prophecies about the Great Tribulation leave no room for doubt, and the events of 2025 align with unsettling precision with the lines of biblical mysteries. But no matter how loud the global scenarios scream, the greatest calling is not for the nations. It's not for governments, it's for you. This is your moment to evaluate your own faith, to look within and decide whose side you'll be on when the next seal is broken and the events we've only read about in Scripture begin to unfold before our eyes. Maybe there is still time. Maybe this is the final warning before the definitive beginning of the Great Tribulation. And the most amazing part is realizing that even now, even with all the signs, God still extends his hand. He still calls. He still awakens. He still whispers through the noise of chaos, saying, "Return to me while there is time." This could be your last chance for a new beginning, a moment to come back, to kneel down, to rebuild the altar of your faith, and to decide that your life will no longer be driven by fear, but by hope and by the truth that comes from the Word. If you feel that God has brought you to this video, if something burned in your spirit, if this content confronted you, then leave a comment below, sharing what impacted you the most, which part of this journey moved you, and what God spoke to your heart. This exchange, this reflection, could awaken others who today are just scrolling through their feed, searching for answers, without realizing that the greatest answer lies in the spiritual decision each of us needs to make. Because no matter how much the world tries to ignore it, the spiritual clock is already counting down, and the decision now is yours.